A sharply dressed elderly white woman suddenly cried out in panic, her voice slicing through the air like glass. "My handbag! Someone stole it!" Her eyes darted frantically, scanning the bustling airport crowd until they landed on the only black woman nearby. It was her. "You took it!" she shouted, pointing with a trembling hand adorned in gold rings. The accusation hit like a slap, utterly baseless, yet delivered with such conviction that all heads turned toward the woman she targeted. She tried to stay composed. Her voice was steady, respectful. "There must be some mistake. I haven't taken anything." But no one listened. Within moments, 3 uniformed officers arrived, their expressions unreadable, except for the oldest one who already seemed to have made up his mind. He didn't ask for evidence. He didn't question the accuser. His narrowed eyes and clipped tone said it all. He only needed her skin color and a pointed finger to cast judgment. Verbal abuse followed. One officer moved to cuff her, ignoring her calm protests. The cold steel of the handcuffs snapped around her wrists, echoing across the terminal like thunder. She was a federal agent. And yet, here she was, being treated like a common thief in front of an audience of strangers, phones recording her shame. Humiliation churned in her stomach, but her training kept her from reacting with force. Then, during the search, they found something, but it wasn't the missing handbag. It was something entirely different. Something that made all 3 officers' faces turn ghost white. What happened next would leave the entire airport stunned. Just minutes earlier, FBI Special Agent Aria Bennett had stepped off her flight at Bayport International Airport, returning home after attending a federal finance conference in Capitol Hill, Virginia. The trip had been productive, but Aria was more than ready to get back to her apartment, maybe swing by the FBI field office to finalize a few reports. At 35, Aria had the sharp mind of a seasoned investigator and the calm presence of someone who had learned to navigate high-pressure situations. She wore black slacks and a vest, carried a compact suitcase and work tote. Her black hair was tied neatly behind her head, makeup subtle, presence professional. She moved with purpose, her eyes always scanning, an instinct from years in law enforcement. As the crowd moved through the gate, a piercing voice shattered the hum of airport noise. "Oh no, my wallet. Where is it?" The voice belonged to Margaret Whitmore, a wealthy white woman in her 60s, draped in high-end fashion and glittering with jewelry. She tore through her designer handbag in a panic, unable to locate what she thought had been stolen. Her eyes darted, then locked on Aria. Without hesitation, she raised her voice again. "You walked past me after we got off the plane. You took it. Give me my wallet back." Aria blinked, stunned by the absurdity of the accusation. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "I'm certain there's been a misunderstanding. Please check your bag again." But Margaret wasn't listening. Her voice rose with ugly certainty. "Don't lie. I know your type. You look decent, but you're nothing but a thief." Her voice whipped the crowd into whispers and gasps. "Security! Someone get the police! Stop her!" The tension drew the attention of 3 officers on patrol. Leading them was Sergeant Alan Murch, a white man in his late 40s, his face creased with years of stress, or perhaps arrogance. Behind him came 2 other officers, Patrolman Jake Foster, a fresh-faced young recruit, and Officer Emily Lawson, a more composed woman in her mid-30s. They approached the crowd with authority, unaware that what they were walking into would soon become one of the most regrettable moments of their careers. "Mrs. Whitmore, what's happening here?" barked Sergeant Murch, his voice firm, demanding order. His eyes moved briefly over the distraught, lavishly dressed older woman before settling on Aria Bennett, the only black woman in the crowd. Aria stood tall, calm on the surface, but her eyes revealed the storm brewing within. Murch didn't hesitate. His mind had already chosen a side. "The officers are here," Margaret cried out, practically giddy with relief. "She took my wallet right after we got off the plane. It had everything. Cash, credit cards. You need to arrest her." Her voice was trembling with manufactured emotion, her tone accusing, her eyes wild. She didn't present a shred of evidence, but Murch didn't care. Without even addressing Aria, he snapped, "You heard the lady. Give back the wallet. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Aria could feel heat rise to her face. Rage, disbelief, the sting of injustice. "Officer," she said, voice firm but restrained. "This is a misunderstanding. I did not take anything. She should check her bag again, or, better yet, review the security footage from the gate. I am completely innocent." Murch sneered, a look of utter disdain flashing across his face. "Oh, sure. Now you want cameras? That's a classic move. Dress sharp, act polite, pull a con at the airport. I've seen your kind before." He didn't bother hiding the contempt in his words, equating her with criminals not because of her actions, but because of her appearance. Behind him, Foster, the younger officer, nodded as if agreeing with everything his superior said. Lawson, the female officer, showed a flicker of concern, but remained silent, watching uneasily. The weight of it all was unbearable. Aria's eyes locked onto Murch. "Sergeant Murch," she said coldly, her voice like ice, "you are making accusations without cause. Your language is offensive and discriminatory. I am demanding that you treat me with respect and uphold my civil rights." Her fearless tone made Murch's face twist with anger. He felt his authority was being questioned, by a black woman no less. "Civil rights?" he bellowed. "You think you can lecture me? Criminals like you don't get to talk about rights. You're resisting arrest right now." Things escalated fast. "Foster, Lawson, cuff her. She's under arrest for theft and resisting," he ordered. Aria's voice rose in protest. "You can't do this. I've done nothing wrong." But her words only fueled their determination. Foster and Lawson closed in, obeying Murch without hesitation. Aria didn't fight back, but she wasn't easy to subdue either. Her training helped her stay composed, though her body instinctively resisted the injustice. A short scuffle unfolded in the terminal lobby, dozens of eyes watching, some recording the incident on their phones. Eventually, Foster twisted her arms behind her back, harshly locking the cuffs into place. The sting of cold metal bit into her wrists. The shame, the pain, the powerlessness, they overwhelmed her all at once. Margaret Whitmore looked on with satisfaction, utterly convinced she had brought a thief to justice. Sergeant Murch approached Aria slowly, his face gleaming with self-righteous satisfaction. "There's no denying it now," he sneered. "Let's see if you've still got that attitude when you're behind bars." He turned to his officers. "Take her away." Aria clenched her teeth, swallowing the pain, willing herself not to break. But just before she was dragged off, Murch paused. Maybe he wanted more validation for his actions. Maybe he just wanted to crush her spirit a little more. "Wait," he said. "Search her. That wallet has to be on her somewhere." He turned to Lawson. "You do it. Protocol or convenience, whatever the reason, he chose the female officer for the job." Lawson stepped forward. Her face betrayed a hint of discomfort, but she followed the order. She began the pat-down, checking Arya's jacket pockets and waistband. Arya didn't flinch, standing stoically, her eyes hardened like stone. Then Lawson's fingers brushed something firm inside Arya's blazer. It wasn't a wallet, not exactly. Her hand paused, then carefully pulled it free. A black leather holder, thin, official. She opened it slowly and froze. As Officer Lawson's fingers reached into Arya's blazer, she brushed against something unexpectedly solid and metallic. It wasn't the size or shape of a typical wallet. Her brows furrowed. Carefully, she pulled it free. A slim, black leather case, the kind used to hold credentials. Opening the flap, she froze. Inside was not a single dollar bill or credit card. Instead, gleaming under the terminal lights was a gold badge, finely detailed, centered with a fierce eagle and engraved with 5 unmistakable words: Federal Bureau of Investigation. Beside it, nestled neatly under clear plastic, was a government ID. It displayed a photo of Arya in uniform, her full name beneath: Special Agent Arya Bennett. Lawson's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled. Her skin turned pale. She looked up at Arya in horror, then turned slowly to her colleagues. Sergeant Murch. Foster. Look at this. Her voice cracked as she held the badge out in front of them like a revelation. Both men stepped closer, curious at first, until their eyes registered what they were seeing. The moment was seismic. Whatever smugness or pride they had vanished instantly, replaced by cold, stinging fear. Murch blinked. He couldn't speak. Sweat collected along his brow. He stared at the badge, then at Arya, then back at the badge again. His voice, when it finally emerged, was barely a whisper. FBI? You're an agent? This can't be real. It's fake, right? Foster murmured, but the words lacked conviction. He looked down at his hands, the very ones that had cuffed her just minutes ago. The realization hit them like a freight train. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a career-ending mistake. They hadn't just wrongfully accused someone. They had physically detained, insulted, and humiliated a federal agent. The consequences would be catastrophic. The panic broke Murch completely. He lunged forward, his arrogance collapsing into desperation. Agent Bennett, ma'am, I'm so sorry. He stammered, nearly stumbling over his words. His face was ashen. This was a huge mistake, a terrible misunderstanding. We didn't know. I swear, we didn't know who you were. He turned to his subordinates in a frenzy. Foster, Lawson, what are you waiting for? Get those cuffs off her, now. Do you want to be fired? Or worse? The 2 officers scrambled, hands fumbling with the keys, shaking as they tried to unlock the cuffs clamped tightly around Arya's wrists. Murch kept talking, his voice now filled with panic. It was that woman, the one who yelled. We were under pressure. It all happened so fast. Please, Agent Bennett, don't escalate this. Please, don't report us. You have no idea what this could do to us. Please, please. Arya stood still, allowing the cuffs to be removed. Her expression was blank, stone cold. She rubbed her reddened wrists slowly. The silence around her was deafening. Not a single word of forgiveness passed her lips. Her pride was still intact. But so was the anger, the righteous fury of a woman who had just been publicly degraded because of her skin color and her assumed status. She didn't shout. She didn't lash out. Instead, she straightened her vest with care, took the badge case from Lawson's trembling hand, and slid it calmly back inside her jacket. Her icy gaze swept over the 3 officers. They stood like children awaiting punishment, pale and helpless. But Arya didn't raise her voice. She didn't waste her breath on them. She simply reached into her work bag, pulled out her FBI-issued phone, and unlocked the screen. The officers watched in dread, knowing full well that whoever she was about to call, it wouldn't end well for them. Arya scrolled through her contacts. She tapped a name, lifted the phone to her ear. Her voice was cool, controlled, commanding. "Chief Harrington, this is Special Agent Arya Bennett. I'm at Bayport International Terminal C. There's been a serious incident involving 3 of your officers." There was a brief pause as Arya listened on the other end of the line. Then her voice remained calm and clear. "I'm at Bayport International Airport, Terminal C. There's been a serious incident involving 3 of your officers, Sergeant Alan Murch, Patrolman Jake Foster, and Officer Emily Lawson." She recounted the events in measured detail. No dramatics, just the facts. Margaret Whitmore's false accusation of theft, Sergeant Murch's openly biased language, their refusal to listen, the illegal detention and invasive search. Her tone was composed. She didn't need to raise her voice. The facts spoke loudly enough. "I request that someone with proper authority be sent here immediately," she concluded before ending the call with precision. She hung up and turned her gaze back to the 3 officers. None of them dared to speak. Their faces were pale, drained of color. At that moment, Arya's silence was more chilling than any outburst. Within minutes, just as expected, a man in plain clothes arrived, flanked by 2 senior-ranking officers. His presence alone silenced the scene. He walked with purpose, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Chief Raymond Harrington. Professional, respected, stern. Possibly someone who had crossed paths with Arya before through federal and local collaborations. His first look was directed at her. There was a flicker of concern behind his otherwise composed demeanor. "Agent Bennett, are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine, Raymond," Arya replied, keeping her voice cool and professional. "Just an unexpected situation." Harrington nodded, then turned sharply to face his 3 subordinates. "Murch, Foster, Lawson, hand over your badges, weapons, and radios immediately." His voice was firm, final. There was no room for questions. The 3 officers obeyed slowly, trembling, eyes downcast, not daring to meet anyone's gaze. Their careers now teetered on the edge of destruction. After they were stripped of their equipment and escorted aside, Chief Harrington turned back to Arya. His tone softened slightly, though still laced with formality and remorse. "Agent Bennett, on behalf of the Bayport Police Department, I deeply apologize for the unprofessional and disgraceful behavior you've experienced today. This should never have happened. We are initiating an immediate internal investigation, and I personally guarantee that appropriate actions will be taken." Just then, another airport security staff member rushed into the scene, holding a beige designer purse. "Mrs. Whitmore," the guard called out to the woman still standing nearby, her posture stiff. "We found your purse. It was buried under the other contents of your bag." She took it, stunned, opened it. Everything was there. Silence hung in the air. Her eyes flicked toward Arya, then toward the officers who had so confidently defended her baseless claims. Her expression was a mix of confusion and dawning shame. Harrington sighed and shook his head. The absurdity of it all was too familiar. He looked to Arya once more. "Let me take you somewhere private, so you can file your full report," he said. Arya nodded. Justice, it seemed, had arrived, but she knew better than to call it closure. The investigation, launched by the Bayport Police Department, into the conduct of Sergeant Murch, Patrolman Foster, and Officer Lawson moved swiftly. Chief Harrington placed the process under strict oversight, with representatives from the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility present to ensure transparency and impartiality. Agent Aria Bennett's testimony became the backbone of the case. She delivered it clearly, methodically, and without embellishment. She detailed how the officers had jumped to conclusions based on a baseless accusation, displayed open racial bias and prejudice, ignored standard verification protocols, used demeaning language, carried out an unlawful arrest and personal search. But the most damning evidence came from the body cameras worn by all three officers. The footage told the story in full, from the moment they approached the scene, to Murch's mocking tone, to the dismissal of Aria's pleas, to the cuffing and humiliating treatment, and finally their panicked reactions after discovering her badge. It was irrefutable. The footage captured from the officers' body-worn cameras was damning. Aria Bennett's calm efforts to explain were completely disregarded. The video showed her being violently handcuffed in public, her dignity stripped as she was treated like a criminal. Then came the shift, the chilling moment when Lawson discovered the FBI badge and the entire energy of the officers collapsed into horror. The recordings made the truth undeniable. They confirmed Aria's innocence and exposed the false accusation made by Margaret Whitmore for what it was, baseless and racially biased. Even though Margaret wasn't the primary focus of the investigation, her role in triggering the injustice was clearly documented. With overwhelming evidence, the three officers, Murch, Foster, and Lawson, were left with no room to deny what they had done. During their internal interviews, Murch tried to blame his actions on stress and the pressures of his job. Foster and Lawson admitted they had followed Murch's orders without questioning the legality or ethics behind them. But they also acknowledged that they had remained silent when they should have intervened. The internal review panel concluded that all three had committed serious violations: clear abuse of power, illegal detention, discriminatory behavior, and conduct that deeply damaged public trust in the police force. And, more importantly, their actions violated the civil rights of a federal agent. When it came time for disciplinary action, Chief Harrington and the Bayport Police Disciplinary Board weighed several factors. These included pressure from the police union, departmental values around reform, and the hope that consequences could lead to meaningful change. Rather than immediately terminate the officers or refer them for criminal prosecution, despite their behavior potentially constituting criminal misconduct, the board implemented a comprehensive and corrective disciplinary path. The first part of the decision was an unpaid suspension lasting 1 full year, intended to give the officers time to confront the gravity of their actions and reflect on their consequences. Next came a mandatory, year-long re-education and reform program, created specifically for officers found guilty of serious misconduct tied to bias, abuse of authority, or professional negligence. The program would be multifaceted. Participants would undergo an in-depth review of legal rights and civil liberties, including updates to federal and state law and proper limitations on law enforcement authority. They would receive focused instruction in emotional intelligence, with courses in managing anger, diffusing tense situations, and practicing respectful communication across cultural lines. They would be required to confront implicit bias directly, attending seminars and group discussions on racism, prejudice, and the social harm caused by unchecked assumptions. Simulated field exercises would challenge them with real-world scenarios, supervised by veteran trainers and psychologists, forcing them to apply what they had learned under pressure. There would also be community engagement components, volunteering and dialogue with leaders from diverse populations to build empathy and human understanding that goes beyond protocol. Throughout the year, their progress would be monitored closely by an independent review board. At the end of the program, the board would determine whether they had shown genuine growth. If the officers successfully completed the training, demonstrated meaningful change, and committed to higher standards, they could be considered for reinstatement, though they would remain under strict supervision for an extended period. However, if they showed no progress, failed evaluations, or demonstrated continued poor conduct, they would be permanently dismissed from the force, with no opportunity for return. This approach sparked debate both inside and outside the department. Some saw it as a progressive, humane path, offering a chance for reform and long-term change rather than just punishment. Others believed it was a soft response, insufficient to deter future misconduct, and too easily allowing those responsible to eventually slip back into positions of power. A few weeks after the disciplinary actions were made public, Aria Bennett sat quietly in her Chicago FBI field office. The city skyline shimmered beyond the tall glass windows. A case file sat open in front of her, but her mind was elsewhere. She had just finished reading the report detailing the outcome of the investigation. Her emotions were mixed. She was relieved that the truth had come to light, that her name had been cleared, and that those who wronged her had been held accountable, at least on paper. But doubt lingered. Would training and suspension truly erase the prejudice that had revealed itself so quickly that day? Would any of them learn to speak up when they saw something wrong? Or would they fall silent again? And what about all the people who didn't wear a badge? Who would defend them? Special Agent Aria Bennett sat quietly in her office at the FBI field headquarters in downtown Chicago, her eyes drifting out the tall glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. In her hand was the official report, a comprehensive account of the investigation and the final disciplinary measures taken against the 3 Bayport officers who had wrongfully detained and humiliated her at the airport. She had read it carefully. Her thoughts were tangled in a mix of relief and quiet frustration. There was a sense of closure in knowing that the truth had come out, that Sergeant Murch, Foster, and Lawson had been suspended, publicly exposed, and placed on a long path of correction. In that sense, justice had been served. Her strength, her professionalism, none of it had been in vain. And yet, unease lingered. Could a year-long suspension and some training sessions truly undo the deep, ingrained bias she had seen so clearly in Murch's eyes? Would it give Foster the courage to question wrongful commands next time? Would Lawson finally speak up instead of standing silently by? Or had this entire disciplinary process simply been a compromise, a way for the system to avoid harder, more permanent decisions, a way to quiet public outrage without shaking the foundation too hard? Aria knew one thing for certain. If it hadn't been for her badge, her title, her position of power, the outcome would have looked very different. She would have been booked, charged, perhaps even convicted before ever getting the chance to speak. The badge didn't just protect her. It exposed the truth, that justice in America sometimes depends more on who you are than what actually happened. And she couldn't stop thinking about everyone who didn't have a badge, the everyday people, without titles, without resources, without power. How many of them are silenced? How many are never believed? How many still live in fear of the same kind of abuse she endured? And was the punishment these officers received really enough to stop the next unjust arrest, the next baseless accusation, the next life altered by prejudice? She didn't know. With a slow exhale, Aria turned back to her computer. There was work to be done. But something inside her had shifted. The airport incident would never leave her. It was burned into her memory as a moment of clarity, a painful reminder of the silent battles so many are forced to fight every day. It had deepened her resolve, not just as an agent, but as a woman, and as a voice in a system still struggling with its own reflection. She would keep fighting, for truth, for fairness, for the voiceless. The road ahead was still long and steep, but she was ready to walk it.